I'll always remember my first playthrough of Cyberpunk 2077, playing as Vincent, a man running out of time and almost out of options, meeting new characters and uncovering new stories added something special to this world. And even years later, those moments still stick with me. But out of everyone, Johnny, Rogue, River, Goro, hell, even Judy to a point, right? There was always one person I felt like I could trust throughout the entire story, and the only one who truly had my back, besides Jackie.
I will remember you.
And that for me was Panam Palmer. Panam is easily one of Night City's most interesting characters, and honestly one that I fell for hard on my first playthrough. And don't lie, you did too. It wasn't just her looks though, it was the way she and V, or in my case Vincent, maybe Valerie in yours, see, we're learning, naturally blended throughout the story. From reluctant allies to hijacking tanks, Panam brought warmth and humanity that made Night City bearable, at least for a while. But before the neon skyscrapers and Merc runs, Panam Palmer was a daughter of the Aldecados, a tribe built on loyalty, struggle, and family. In the desert, family means survival, but even surrounded by people who raised her, Panam just couldn't shake the feeling that this world was way too small for her ambitions. And she always tried to prove she had what it took to lead and make things better. But when no one backed her ideas, she did what she always does and went at it alone. That drive didn't really sit well with Saul, the clan's leader. When he saw caution, she saw hesitation. And that difference pushed her further and further from her family than she ever truly expected. Most problems usually went like this. A problem hit the clan, Panam has an idea, bold, sometimes reckless, and brings it to Saul. Saul plays it safe and shuts it down. Panam feels unheard, storms off, and handles it alone, rinse and repeat about at least 3 to 4 different times. It all reached a breaking point, however. Fed up, angry, and convinced she could somehow do it better on her own, Panam walked away and straight into Night City, deciding to become a mercenary. And Night City was a shock. Skyscrapers, eyes on every corner, and a city that never stops. Eventually she ran into Rogue, a meeting that became one of Panam's biggest regrets. When V first arrives in the afterlife, you hear Panam and Rogue arguing, but aren't really explained why. It just ends with Rogue ending with a sucks to be you kind of attitude. Because you see, what had happened was Panam is actually furious because Rogue paired her with Nash, who she didn't know was a Raffian Shiv. Despite that though, Panam still trusted him until she stole her warhorse truck and a shipment for the 6th Street gang. Realizing Nash was actually Raffian, Panam stormed back to Rogue for help. Rogue refused, and that's when she crossed paths with V, a meeting that would change everything. And it's kind of a funny thing within itself that at the end of the day, Rogue really didn't want to just deal with Panam, but it's also her fault, man. Rogue is just a fixer. It's not her job to fix her fuck-ups, and she realizes that the hard way throughout this interaction. But when she actually meets V, she's meeting V at her absolute lowest. She lost her truck, her pride, her patience, and her trust. Everything is just burned to the ground ever since arriving in Night City. It's been nothing but absolute failures. But there's a catch. V actually reports to Panam because V needs Hellman. Rogue's plan is pretty simple, everything considered. Knock down a Kang Tao AV into the Badlands where neither the Kang Tao nor the NCPD can actually interfere, and who better to guide V through the Badlands than a desperate, very pissed off nomad. The relationship starts as very transactional. V helps Panam get her truck and shipment back. Panam helps V snag Hellman. But it all begins with Ghost Town. V and Panam set a trap at Rocky Ridge, and for once, something finally goes right. They get Warhorse back, but Panam immediately wants to go after Nash. And this is not only a reckless, emotional, and dangerous decision, but it's also a very, very stupid one, because for all they knew, there could have been an absolute army in that tunnel. They had no idea what they were up against. Still though, it marks the start of a real trust between the two. Panam is just genuinely asking for V's help, and you don't have to do this. You can say no. But lightning breaks is the very next part, and so is life during wartime, which both drag Panam and V deeper into the absolute chaos that is this plan. You see, their plan is to down the AV, and doing so involves an EMP at the Satwave power plant. Not exactly the brightest idea once again, as the detonator jams, the AV hits late, and Panam panics, firing a rocket to finish the job. The crash actually happens, however, in Aldecaldo territory, problem. Mitch and Scorpion think someone needs help, but Panam has no way to warn them because the EMP knocked out comms. Scorpion dies, and in my opinion, this is 110% Panam's fault. You know, she had more than enough time before running to the plant to make a mention that, hey, if you see a flying taxi being knocked out of the sky, do me a solid and leave it alone, especially because we see her trying to page those two after she's already hit the kaboom button. So you would have figured this is something you would have mentioned beforehand, especially if right after Night City Space and the Badlands was Aldecaldo territory. So in my opinion, completely her fault. Panam is a hot-headed mess who acts on emotion. At this point in time, she doesn't think through consequences. Her need to prove Saul wrong makes her sloppy. She failed with her truck, her shipment, Rogue, and now Scorpion. But Riders of the Storm is where Panam finally truly begins to change. You know, Saul is captured, Panam's trust in V has grown. You start the rescue with 3 approaches. There's a full stealth option, a light combat option, or full-blown chaos. You know, stealth gives unique dialogue, funny enough, if you do absolutely nothing, touch no one, and just free Saul. But if you do the chaos removes it, or the light combat, if my memory is correct, and what I'm checking here in my notes is that it does indeed remove it. But what's important is Panam is learning. She now prefers stealth, thinking through her actions, planning instead of just charging head first. And after rescuing Saul, everything leads to with a little help from my friends and Queen of the Highway. Panam and the others go behind Saul's back to steal a basilisk. But this time, Panam actually has a fucking plan. Climb a train tower, get the punch card, start the train, intercept the convoy. Saul texts you during this mission, and you can't lie to protect Panam's plan 100% with basically no consequences. Doing so, though, unlocks the final romance scene, and it shows something, in my opinion, very, very important. And that's that Panam has been beaten down at every possible turn until she met V, the one person who trusted her without question outside of her clan, right? Because you got to think about it, in Night City, the only thing she's learned is to trust absolutely no one. But you know, they end up stealing the basilisk, they bring it to camp, they fix it up, and eventually they do use it to fight off the Raffi and Shiv one last time, and they share one of the most iconic moments in the entire game. I can't say it because YouTube, but you know where I'm going with this. At the point though, this particular point in particular, she's grown. She's no longer charging blindly, she weighs risks and thinks ahead. You know, Panam's story ends beautifully though in one of 2 ways. There's the star ending. The main Panam ending requires completing all of her quests and surviving and calling her during Nocturne. The Aldecaldo storm Arasaka Tower, Saul dies, but V and Panam survive. V keeps his body, Johnny leaves with Alt, and V leaves Night City with Panam, who sends a romantic message in the credits. And then there's the Temperance ending. It's also possible with romance. V gives his body to Johnny. Panam is pissed in the epilogue, threatening Johnny for taking away V, saying that she's gonna rip V right out of Johnny's head. But you know, both endings say something very important in my opinion. In the star ending, Panam and Saul finally patch things up. You know, Panam is recognized as a real leader, her accomplishments are undeniable. You know, she helped capture Hellman, reclaimed her truck, saved Saul, stole a basilisk, and protected her clan. Reckless at first 100%, but eventually determined, focused, and worthy of respect. She did finally do the thing she always wanted to do, prove Saul wrong, and that she actually does have some good ideas and is worth considering. But you know, I think what's special about Panam as a character is that she's one of the few people that doesn't let the city change her for the worst. I'm especially a fan of the star ending, and by default it's the one I always end up choosing. Not only does she finally get away from the neon lights, but she also leaves with someone she cares about, being V. Sure, V's fate is sealed either way, regardless of open-endedness. I know who you are, which I do not count as living, I'm sorry, but I don't. But you know, for a time, Panam and V do get a happily ever after. And you know, I think that has a lot to say, because a lot of the characters in Night City, especially throughout the game of 2077, they are not the same people that you meet in the beginning, and 9 times out of 10 they turn out for the worst. Hell, look at what happened to Johnny, look at what happened to Jackie, look what even happened to Judy for a time, unless you do her secret ending, which I actually do kind of want to make a video about. Maybe I'll do that in the future. But the point I'm trying to prove is that I think Panam is a really, really great character, and I think her story is really, really interesting. From a woman who self-exiles herself from her own clan to coming around and becoming the leader that she was always destined to be, Panam is a character that proves if you believe in yourself just enough and can hold on to some dignity, maybe the city can't change everyone, but actually improve them in the end.